Good news, you have traveled. Bad news, you have traveled to the world of Warhammer. Good news, it's a medieval Warhammer, not a 40k Warhammer. Bad news, you have traveled to Rick's territory in the Sigma Empire. Good news, it's soul piercing, not body piercing. Bad news, you don't have any cheats or golden fingers. Good news, there are no Beastman settlements near your village. Bad news, there's no chance to go back. Phew, you've successfully traveled. Chapter 1. Travel to the Medieval Warhammer. You are listening at novel-full.audio. When Dello traveled, he traveled to the empire of the medieval Warhammer world. At the beginning of his journey, he was extremely excited to find himself transported to a medieval-style world. As an old player of ancient scrolls and D&D, he yearns too much for this kind of time-traveling life. As long as one travels through the Middle Ages and relies on their knowledge and abilities as a traveler, even if they have not been reincarnated into noble families at the beginning, they can slowly climb to the peak of wealth and power. Will the basic goal of having a castle and an harem be achieved directly by then? But when he found out that the land he had traveled to was called Rick's land, the country he had traveled to was called the Empire, and the ruler of the Empire was also named Franz. It's over, it's all over, and now we're traversing the world of medieval Warhammers. What is the concept of medieval Warhammer? There are rat people underground, beast people in the forest, Nazca chaos to the north, vampires to the east, and even terrifying demons may appear everywhere. Let's put it this way, crossing into the world of medieval Warhammers means a death probability far exceeding 100%, which means there is a terrifying situation where someone else will resurrect them and then kill them again. It was also from this moment that Wendello, who had just crossed this world, immediately became silent. The initial passion and excitement dissipated completely, and at the same time, he never showed a single smile and said a word. The parents here even invited a witch hunter to investigate him, suspecting that his child had been contaminated by something ominous. He grew up to 3 years old without saying a word. Even after the age of 8, I don't go to the edge of the forest with other children to play. After seeing Wendello, the witch hunter conducted a simple investigation using the sacred object in his hand. The good news is that this child was not contaminated by chaos, nor was he mutated into a beast man by the dimensional stone. Perhaps he was just a mute, or perhaps he was simply a fool. But fortunately, Wendell successfully grew up to the age of 15. However, within the Empire, children from ordinary families cannot obtain enough nutrition. In addition, Wendello, who is particularly afraid of forests and the outskirts of villages and lacks exercise and food, has always had poor physical fitness. Fortunately, as a traveler, his brain can still function. Being able to help others with accounting and mathematical calculations in a small village to earn some basic living expenses. Within the Empire, all boys will choose their own livelihood when they reach adulthood at the age of 15. Marcus Krupper from the same village suggested that Wendell join the army in Glenburg with him to improve his weak physical condition. However, Wendello was well aware that the survival probability of the Imperial Provincial Army was only slightly higher than that of the neighboring Star Army when fighting against various terrifying enemies. But my family doesn't have money, so I can't be a wealthy second generation who eats old. At the same time, I didn't pay attention to my physical fitness when I was young, and couldn't even farm in adulthood. Farming would definitely lead to starvation. For someone like Wendell who is sensitive to numbers and skilled in addition and subtraction up to 100 and multiplication and division up to 10, the best choice is to spend money to study at Imperial University or Nuen Artillery Academy. If you don't have money, you can only become an Imperial walking salesman, relying on small business to make a living. So, at the age of 15, Wendello was kicked out of the house by his parents and embarked on the path of finding his own life. Feeling in his pocket, there were only 300 copper coins that he had accumulated through accounting. Based on the current prices that Rick was receiving, eating a meal would cost 3 copper coins. 3 meals a day, and 300 copper coins would barely cover a month's food expenses. If there is no other way to make money, Wendell will probably starve to death on the roadside within a month. If he wants to make money, just like before traveling, big cities naturally have opportunities. The first thing he thinks of is going to the capital city of Rick. Maybe he can find a good source of income in Aldoff City. All the way north, thanks to the proper management of Emperor Louis Franz, there are many imperial official roads within the territory of Rick. As long as you walk on the official road, you can safely reach your destination. A group of imperial provincial soldiers walked past Wendello, with bright flags, exquisite half-armor, sharp swords and sturdy spears in their hands. These professional soldiers were able to resist various enemies. The orderly patrol of such a standing army on the road means that the nearby security is definitely good, but it also represents bad news. A level was blocked on the road, and 2 soldiers holding long spears guarded the intersection one by one. Yes, that's right. In addition to security patrols and battles, the Imperial Provincial Army is also responsible for some basic taxes and tolls. Hey, kid, don't run, come here. The front foot had already stepped out of the Imperial Canal, and Wendello, who had just lifted his back foot, could only touch the back of his head and smile awkwardly. Then he slowly ran to the long lancer and bowed. 2 officers, that, I won't go over, will it be free of charge? How many long halberd soldiers are there? With 80 long halberd soldiers, they can even kill a chaotic demon. Wendello doesn't need to touch their mold. The empire is indeed free, but if they don't pay taxes, the punishment will be quite severe. However, one of the long halberds touched his beard, took off the kettle from his belt, and then threw it over. The kettle, full of dents and friction marks, was quickly caught by Wendello. Child, of course we can see that you want to go over. Go, help us fetch a pot of water by the lake, and then let you go over. This veteran who has served for more than 10 years has never seen anything before, and naturally knows that guys like Wendello who come out to explore must be penniless. It doesn't matter if you let him go, the imperial tax system is not completely strict, and helping to run errands is also a way to pay taxes. Wendello couldn't help but sense the meaning behind his words. He immediately ran happily towards the lake with a kettle, filling it with all the gurgling in the water. He even kept scooping water from the lake, slowly cleaning the dirt off the kettle. While scooping water with my hands, I suddenly stumbled upon something strange in the lake and quickly picked it up. It turned out to be a small wallet made of linen fabric. Upon opening it, although there is no unexpected wealth inside, it can still be used as one's own wallet after drying. After all, when going out, one should always pay attention to the safety of their belongings. I poured all 300 copper coins into my wallet, but it didn't seem to bulge at all. From the outside, it still looked like an empty pocket, as if there was no money inside. I couldn't feel any copper coins inside from the outside, and as Wendell opened his wallet completely and stared inside with wide eyes. The empty wallet seemed to have eaten away all his savings. Chapter 2. Aldoff. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mom is the first chapter of the grand finale. Money is life, without money means without life. The 300 copper coins that Wendello had worked hard to save were eaten clean by this wallet, leaving not a single penny behind. No matter how you pour it out, even a single copper coin won't come out of a parched wallet. Is this pocket a money-eating thing? Wendello, who was so unattainable, immediately reached his hand in, but as soon as he reached in, he felt a familiar touch. Round, hard, it's clearly your own copper coin. Then he slowly pulled out his previous copper coins, one after another, and all 300 copper coins were pulled out again. Now Wendell realized what treasure he had picked up. Endless space storage bag, anything that can pass through the wallet pocket can be infinitely stored in this wallet. At present, it is unclear where the limit of this wallet lies. Through multiple experiments, Wendello has determined the specific function of this thing. The caliber is about the size of a fist, and anything smaller than the fist can be put into this special wallet. The most crucial thing is that this thing can hide everything that is placed inside, without any difference visible from the outside. This is great. For imperial travelers traveling south and north, the biggest concern is that their money is not easy to keep. With such a pocket, you can put all your wealth into it without worrying about being easily discovered by others. Quickly put all the copper coins into the magical wallet and carry them on your body. Pick up the kettle and run towards the level. The two long halberds were not impatient to wait. After all, Wendello was seen by them as a weak child who had not received training like the Imperial Provincial Army, so it didn't matter if they delayed a little time. After gulping down the refreshing lake water from the pot, he also wiped his beard with leather gloves and shook his hand at Wendello. Hurry up and go over. This time, it represents that I have officially set foot on the land of the capital city of Aldoff. Even if it is still in the suburbs of the city, no bandit dares to rob nearby. The frequent patrols of the Imperial Provincial Army can also ensure that there is no wild beast in the forest here. The huge and majestic imperial capital appeared in front of Wendello, surprising him, who had just come out of the countryside. This is a city located on the Rick River, which divides the entire city into 3 regions flowing from west to east. The towering city walls and the stony streets shocked Wendello, a country bumpkin. These walls are at least 30 meters high, and they are used to deal with such terrifying enemies. Looking left and right, he walked forward until a pair of leather gloves pressed against his head. City tax. Standing guard here is no longer a simple imperial provincial army. Holding a 2-handed giant sword, wearing half-body armor and a beautifully feathered helmet on top of his head, this is the most powerful elite infantry of the empire, the giant swordsman. It was too mediocre for them to guard the city gate, so the 2 giant swordsmen at the entrance had a very bad attitude. Seeing Wendello's wallet deflated like a flattened frog, they lost interest even more. 3 copper coins were thrown into the nearby tax box with a clanging sound. Go ahead. Wendello successfully arrived at the city center of Aldoff. The people walking on the road were all city dwellers dressed cleanly and neatly, which was a huge difference and gap from him, a rural person with patches all over his body. Because of such a poor attire, even the servants of the nobility around cast contemptuous looks, and some people looked at Wendell while whispering, full of ridicule and ridicule. This is the capital of the entire empire, Aldoff. If this child dares to reach out and beg, then call the guards and kick him out of the city. The gaze around him was scorching. Even though all he saw towards Wendello were humans, he still felt as if he was surrounded by a group of orcs. A strong sense of shame slowly emerged from his heart, and the feeling of being looked down upon by others due to poverty made him feel both ashamed and resentful, but helpless. I can only tightly hold on to the wallet filled with copper coins and dare not loosen it. In big cities, money is the most important thing. I want to make money. The sound was very faint, but Wendello could hear it clearly. The shout that erupted from the deepest part of his heart made him no longer afraid of this big city. I want to make a lot of money. Once again, the sound jumped out from the deepest part of my throat, causing people in the surrounding shops to also look at me. Then, I laughed and continued with what I was doing, or tasted a comfortable afternoon tea. When Wendell first entered the city, he was still a bit shy, like a young man who had just entered a big city, afraid of being looked down upon by those around him. But after shouting such a seemingly lawless sentence, I felt much better in my heart. There was no need to continue to care about face, making money was the most important thing. What is making money? This may take millions of words to write in economics. Wendello doesn't care about that much. He knows there's only one way to make money, which is to buy at a low price and sell at a high price. Aldoff is the capital of the entire human empire, and the prices here are very high, except for. The sound of the furnace roaring and burning came from the end of the road, and through the paved road, all the way to the entire Aldoff handicraft area. Here, countless furnaces are emitting heat, and the wood inside is burning with a crackling sound. One shirtless worker after another is taking out fired pottery from the kiln. Aldoff is located along the banks of the Rick River, with a large amount of high-quality clay nearby. Coupled with the best pottery workers, Aldoff pottery is also well-known throughout the entire empire. In addition, with enough clay pipes, the pottery here is naturally very cheap. How much does this, plus these, cost? Quickly walking to the entrance of a good pottery shop, Wendello pointed to the pottery bowls and pots placed on the counter. The owner of a pottery shop saw Wendel's presence at a glance, a young man who had just reached adulthood. Buying pottery. For personal use. Not like that, perhaps it's running errands for a certain nobleman and earning errand fees, so the price increase should not be too drastic. Locals know the market situation. After some thought, the shop owner also walked over with a smile on his face. The most important thing in business is not to underestimate customers. Whoever comes, he always has a smile on his face. Friend, your taste is really good. These are the best pottery in our store. If you pack them all, you only need 500 copper coins. The goods are indeed good, as long as they are transported to the neighboring city of Nuen, they can even sell for a high price of 800 copper coins. The only problem now is that Wendello can't pull out these 500 copper coins. Chapter 3. Original Shares. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Just 300 copper coins, that's all I have. Wendello is honest, even if he were to squeeze himself completely, he only had 300 copper coins on his body. No, it was 297 copper coins, and there were 3 copper coins that paid the city tax. Upon hearing these words, the owner of the pottery shop was taken aback. A cold sweat quickly dripped down his face, and his expression shrank, but he still regained his smile in a short period of time. It's strange. I can make a profit from selling 200 copper coins for this batch of pottery. My lowest expectation in my heart is 297 copper coins. Is this guy from the same industry? The shop owner had a series of thoughts in his mind, but Wendello's attention remained focused on the pottery without even glancing at him. This guy, he must know that the price in my heart is 297 copper coins. He must know, but how did he know? Thinking about what he just said, he took 300 copper coins. Is it possible that he is a spy sent by another store? The shop owner had already turned around, with a worried expression on his face, and his right hand was touching his chin, constantly pondering. I thought this kid was just an ignorant outsider. Is he someone sent by the mayor's council? Did I find out about my unauthorized price increase? That's not good. The mayoral council is an institution within the empire that protects commerce. After all, if every store and factory starts a price war, it will be very unfavorable for merchants to make money. The establishment of this organization is to avoid the impact of large-scale price increases and price reductions on the imperial economy, and any individuals and guilds who violate them will face serious sanctions. My heart trembled again, and I quickly turned to look at Wendello. Fortunately, this kid's attention was still focused on the pottery. The shop owner hurriedly walked over with a haha. Young man, you're good at discerning goods. It's good. Considering that you're a new customer and also have a good understanding of pottery, 300 copper coins will be sold. Ah, Wendello was also surprised. Half-price cutting was just a common strategy he used before traveling. He couldn't afford it himself, but now he has made a deal. Is it difficult? Is there a problem with this batch of pottery? Gently pick up the pottery and observe it back and forth, left and right, but I can't understand it myself, so I can only pretend. But this scene directly frightened the shop owner. He encountered an expert, and just as he was thinking about further explanation, Wendello put down the pottery in his hand. He really can't understand, but he can also tell that there are no cracks on the pottery. Slowly, I took out copper coins from my wallet, one after another, exactly 297, not many, not many. That's all there is. Wendello spread his hands, indicating that this was all his money and that the boss liked to sell it or not. But in the eyes of the shop owner, it feels like facing the judgment of the mayor's council firsthand. Why can this guy see through my price range at a glance? It happens to be 297, not much at all, isn't it? The shop owner was already starting to fear. He knew that the person standing in front of him was a bottomless businessman and a member of the evaluation committee. Fortunately, he had been more cautious before and did not say any more outrageous prices because of his patchwork. Seeing the shop owner freeze in place, this is not good news. It is very likely that this guy will directly refuse the transaction. Immediately, he pushed out all the money, then brought over all the pottery, and also took a linen backpack from the shop owner. After packing everything, he quickly left. It wasn't until Wendell left that the shop owner finally recovered and quickly closed the door to his shop. He is very certain that he has met someone from the mayor's council and must avoid the limelight these days. And Wendello, on the other hand, picked up a big bargain and had already run to the side of the Rick River in the city of Aldoff. The shopkeeper would definitely regret spending 297 copper coins on something that was originally priced at 500 copper coins, and then search for him everywhere. So, if you get a discount, you must be good at it. As a traveler, Wendello understands a basic principle very well. A person who has picked up a good deal and is still very lucky will definitely be plagued by bad luck in the future. Making a fortune quietly is the most important thing for a person to do. Sitting on the stone bricks along the banks of the Rick River, with one buttocks up and one leg stretched out, hiding one's own figure, patiently waiting. If everything goes smoothly today, then the pottery in one's bag will be considered as one's complete property. In addition, sitting still without a penny can save energy and prevent hunger. As the water source in the Rick River continued to flow towards the west, the sun slowly sank, and the entire capital was shrouded in a layer of darkness. Candles began to light up around, and shops operating night businesses opened one by one. Aldolfa's night has also arrived. After patting the dust on his buttocks, Wendell also stood up from the ground and stretched lazily. Although there is no danger from wild beasts, humans, or animals in the city, it is necessary to face various potential risks in the city. Whenever night falls, the rat people lurking under the city of Aldoff will come out to search for food and assassinate targets. These mice, the same size as humans, will burrow out of various unexpected sewers. When the victim is cut in the throat by a dagger, they can only see a pair of crimson eyes. Half-bodied thieves will also carry out their own theft work after nightfall, and these small creatures will steal everything without a lock and then take it all for themselves. Whether in urban or rural areas, one must pay attention to personal safety at night. Wendello continued to walk along the river, preparing to find a suitable place to spend the night, and happened to arrive at a shallow swamp that was completely deserted. Perhaps he could make do with the night here. But at this moment, a figure by the river caught his attention. With a tall figure, purple long hair, and a pair of pupils emitting a faint purple light, even though the guy completely covered his ears with hair, Wendell saw through her identity at a glance. She is an elf, and also a dark elf among the elf clan. Dark elves are the most terrifying branch of elves. At the beginning, when the elves were still a unified race, these elves were only fighting against demons, and the soldiers fighting on the front line gradually developed a bloodthirsty and belligerent habit during the battle. After all the demons were exiled, these bloodthirsty and belligerent elves were not accepted by the mainstream society of elves, and had no choice but to live in the northernmost part of the elf world, a wasteland equivalent to exile. Later on, there was a civil war that completely divided the elves into two tribes, and this group of bloodthirsty and belligerent elves called themselves Duruchi. In the mouths of other races, they were called dark elves. For the dark elves, Wendello doesn't have much hostility. As for why can a dark elf run to the capital of the Sigma Empire, Aldoff? Perhaps it was for some assassination mission. He didn't disturb, he left first, so as not to become the target of that guy. Little did they know that their footsteps were completely exposed and fell clearly into the ears of the dark elf. Before they could react, a slender dagger was placed on his neck. Chapter 4. Mus Norrester. You are listening at novel full.audio. No matter what you see, it's not important anymore. A crisp female voice came in from Wendello's left ear, spinning in his brain, almost stirring his entire brain into a paste. It's just a pity that humans like you keep what could have been a good slave. However, this dark elf overlooked the most crucial aspect. They love to torture others before killing them, and the mournful cries they shout from the victims are the favorite beautiful music of the dark elves. So she just put the dagger head on Wendell's neck, but didn't cover his mouth. At this time, Wendell still has a glimmer of hope. In terms of combat effectiveness and skills, only the Batnian fierce men among humans can compete with the dark elves. The Kisrif and Nosker humans have strong combat abilities, but lack combat skills and can be played with by dark elves in their hands. As an empires like myself, I have neither combat ability nor combat skills. Resistance is definitely meaningless, such as elbow strikes, monkeys stealing peaches, and catching daggers to counterattack. All of these are just jokes. Perhaps the Imperial swordsman could do it, but as a battle scumbag like Wendello, he couldn't complete any attack actions. Now there is only one mouth left to save him. Shouting loudly to attract Imperial soldiers on patrol. This is meaningless. After shouting it out, although it can attract Imperial soldiers on patrol, when they come over, they can only collect their bodies. Cain is on top. At this critical moment of life and death, Wendello's mind can be considered to be operating very quickly. When such a sentence came out of his mouth, it immediately puzzled the dark elves behind him. Cain, the deity of the elves, is the god of violence, war, cruelty, bloodshed, destruction, and murder. Every elf prays to such a deity before the battle begins, hoping to receive its blessings and possess stronger strength in the battle. In the eyes of the dark elves, Cain's position is above all the gods, and naturally it is also the belief of the dark elf behind him. Interesting, it's so interesting. The dark elf behind him laughed heartily, and the dagger in his hand loosened slightly. At this moment, Wendello felt a small gap cut open in his neck by the dagger, and blood seeped out slightly. It's a close call. If the strength of this dark elf had increased slightly, he would have died just now. I would like to hear why, as a human, you believe in our great Cain. After being slightly away from danger, Wendello was given some time to rest. He knew the entire history of the elves and could naturally articulate the most appropriate reasons. Cain taught us to use killing to stop killing, using war to stop fighting, emphasizing the artistry of killing in the magnificence of war, survival of the fittest, and survival of the fittest. The dagger had completely left Wendello's neck, while the dark elf behind slowly murmured the last word in his mouth. That's right, survival of the fittest. Then he gave Wendello a heavy pat on the shoulder, causing him to stumble around and see up close the appearance of the dark elf, his cold and stern face looking down at him. Light purple long hair, deep purple eyes, beautiful face but with a scar on the left eye position, not wearing any armor on the body, only a thin leather armor for protection. The whole person's height has actually reached a terrifying 1.8 meters, and if that ear is added, the whole person can even reach a height of 1.9 meters. Wendello did hear that the elves were taller and stronger than humans, but this terrifying height difference still surprised him. In contrast, this guy's chest is not large and his limbs are not thick, overall very balanced. At a glance, it can be seen that she is a dark elf who is skilled in training and has truly fought on the battlefield. Her identity is not low, and she may still be a big shot. Mus Norrester, former dark elf fear lord, fled to your human world after failing to fight against the Witch King. The words were spoken from the pale purple lips of the dark elf named Mus, with a hint of sweetness, just like a cold wind blowing from the ice and snow, forcefully squeezing into Wendello's brain. Wendello, surnamed Nuen, is an imperial merchant who came from a small village in the south with the goal of becoming a millionaire by running errands. Since the dark elf named Mus revealed her family background, Wendello must also tell the truth, but he didn't understand why the dark elf would tell her story. Is it all a lie? Mus naturally also saw the confusion on Wendello's face. The elf race has stronger senses and observation than humans, and she wouldn't miss any tiny expression. Because I need your help, I am an elf and cannot move freely on your human land, and you are my greatest helper. Me. How can I help you? It's very simple. If you continue to run business and make money, we will divide the money we earn into 3 or 7 parts. You keep 3 parts, and I will take 7 parts. This is already the greatest favor that the Dark Elves can give you. Wendell saw for the first time a person who spoke so openly about extortion. After all, in the eyes of the Dark Elves, except for elves, all other races are just slaves, and preventing slaves from starving to death is already the greatest kindness of the Dark Elves. Mu's statement is indeed reasonable. For the Dark Elves, being able to allow slaves to retain 3 parts of their property is indeed the greatest benefit. But how can this work? I still have to do business. If I give you all the money, where will the principal come from? What do I rely on to purchase goods? Where can I earn more from doing physical labor? Ha! This is the first time that Mus has heard of the resistance of the human race, and he dares to refuse his offer of a 30-70 split. This guy is a bit interesting. So what do you want to do? After all, this place is still the land of humanity, which is very different from the Nagaros where the Dark Elves are located. I'm not your slave, but the 2 of us can form a company. I'm responsible for running a business, and you're responsible for security. Me. Security, I haven't heard such arrogant words in almost 100 years. No, just think about it. If you lie still every day, wouldn't your combat ability decline? I'm the bait, responsible for luring the enemy to train your combat skills. Wendello's words indeed spoke to Mus's heart. If there is no battle for a long time, his combat ability will indeed decline, which is the most worrying thing for the Dark Elves. In that case, being a security guard is also acceptable. After killing someone in self-defense, it can also avoid being wanted and pursued by the Sigma Empire. I have come to this question for the time being, but if I want to accumulate enough strength to return to Nagaros, where does the large amount of wealth come from? Mus was well aware that a human slave could not earn much money. So let's not discuss wealth distribution for now. How do you make money? I need you to make a lot of money for me. Chapter 5. The beginning of the journey. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The wheels of history roll forward, and in the later Imperial Library, when people browse through the life stories of Wendello, they will notice the beginning story of the entire book. Near the most secluded riverbank of Aldoff city, this imperial merchant easily defeated the terrifying Lord of Fear among the Dark Elves with his powerful combat abilities. According to the description, on that night, at the age of only 15, Wendello relied on his fists to subdue the fully armed Dark Elf Fear Lord, who was wearing plate armor and wielding a refined steel sword shield. Even with his strong personality, charm and sense of friendship, he forgave the rude and proactive attack of the Dark Elf, and even made the Dark Elf his best companion. All readers can imagine from the first story of Wendello's biography how terrifying the fighting power of such a past hero was. I really can't beat you, really, let me go. Wendello struggled to get up from the ground, constantly begging for mercy. And Mus, standing in front of him, shook her head. She had seen many humans, but it was the first time she had encountered someone like Wendello, who had no combat power. I originally wanted to practice it well to avoid getting rusty in combat skills, but I didn't expect Wendell to be so inexperienced. A slap made him lose his combat effectiveness. You can't fight, what do you make money from? Ah. Mus's mood once again fell to the bottom of the valley. In the thinking of the Dark Elves, only individuals with strong combat power have the ability to make big money. As for Wendell, who was powerless, she couldn't imagine how this guy could keep the coins flowing into her pocket. As soon as he talked about making money, he finally reached the area where Wendello was good at. He quickly took out a whole set of pottery from his backpack. I bought this batch of goods for 300 copper coins, and just need to transport it to Nuen City to sell a full 800 copper coins. Is that all? Dark Elves and High Elves are different. High Elves value commerce, but in the eyes of Dark Elf Muse, running a business is a very vulgar behavior. The fact that running a business itself does not create wealth and can make money by transporting goods from one place to another is very puzzling to Muse. In her eyes, the best way to make money is to kill others and seize their wealth. What kind of business is it? But as a Dark Elf wandering into the human world, she certainly knows some basic geographic knowledge. The city of Nuen in Wendello's mouth is not far from Aldoff, and if you walk normally, it will take about 3 days to reach. 3 days of safe walking can earn a net profit of 500 copper coins without any risk or danger. Although he didn't earn much, at least he did make some money. Moreover, Muse had just wandered into the human world, penniless, and had been starving for several days. Compared to making big money, the most important thing now is to fill your stomach. Let's go for business now. The most important thing now is to quickly earn income. The Dark Elves are like this. Without any wealth, it means that life has come to an end. Okay, human Wendello, let's set off now and head to the so-called city of Nuen, then make money, and we'll split the bill. But it's already dark now, why don't we find a place to rest first? Compared to elves with strong physical strength and excellent endurance, Wendello, a human, is still very resistant to traveling at night. However, after Muse cast a cold, deep purple gaze, he could only pick up his linen pocket on the ground and leave the capital city of Aldoff along with the Dark Elf through the banks of the Rick River. In the cold sky, there are 2 bright moons hanging. Compared to humans, Muse has stronger night vision ability and can easily see the roads under the night sky. The Dark Elves are like a night demon, wandering through the streets of Aldoff, even more aware of the layout of such a city than Wendello. In the last 3 or 2 steps, they climb over the last wall, then turn around and open their hands to Wendello. Jump, I'll follow you. The Lord of Fear can easily climb over the wall, but the physical fitness of ordinary humans cannot achieve it. But still with a hard face, Muse withdrew his hands at this moment, causing Wendell to fall to the ground. Although the ground below was already muddy, it still hurt a lot from falling. It felt like a big stone had shattered my chest, and it was difficult for me to get up from the ground. I had never suffered such a serious injury since I was so big. However, as Muse withdrew his hands and looked down at Wendello slowly climbing up on the ground, he also nodded slightly. Coincidentally, both met the demands of the Dark Elf. There is no trust among the Dark Elves. Although this human named Wendello also believes in Cain, of course, he cannot be absolutely trusted. And although this guy doesn't seem to have strong physical fitness, it doesn't mean he doesn't know magic, so he must keep an eye out for it. Lord Fear is like this, he won't completely give his back to others. Such a fall also greatly weakened Wendello's already weak combat power, completely losing his threat to Muse. Even if given a dagger now, he would not be able to kill Muse while he was sleeping. There is also an important aspect that is related to trust. If Wendello seizes an opportunity to escape as soon as he leaves the city, wouldn't all of Muse's preparations be in vain? Making him fall like this also destined that this human must rely on the protection of the Dark Elves to survive in the future. As far as she knows, the human world is filled with bandits everywhere, and it is difficult for a businessman to move without protection. Originally, everything was in Muse's prediction, but the only unexpected thing was that Wendell actually managed to get up from the ground on his own. This is commendable. In the eyes of the Dark Elves, the essence of this world is cold, cruel, and ruthless, with the law of the fittest. Only strong enough individuals can survive. Being able to climb up on his own strength at least proves that this guy's willpower is quite good. Are you unharmed? If you're unharmed, let's set off immediately. Wendello, who was well aware of the temper and personality of the Dark Elves, suppressed the pain in his chest and gave a smiling thumbs up. Of course it's okay, it's just over 3 meters high. If the Dark Elves were to know that they were weak, they might have been killed early the next morning. But how could a Lord of Fear not see that Wendello was showing off? It didn't matter at all, and then he sidestepped to keep Wendello in her sight. I don't know the direction to Nuen City, lead the way, you go ahead. Chapter 6. Ambush. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Good news, bad news. The good news is that Mus, as a Lord of Fear, has excellent control over distance, and it takes just 3 days to travel from Aldoff to Nuen. The bad news is that there is a prerequisite for this time, which is to ride a horse and walk on the official road. Only by meeting these 2 prerequisites can we arrive at Nuen in just 3 days. It is impossible to walk official roads. The Dark Elves and Empires have one thing in common, which is the path. Although roads can increase movement speed, they also have a fatal drawback, which is that they have toll gates. And of course, a Dark Elf would not set foot on the official path of the Empire. After walking all night, just as a hint of fish belly white appeared in the sky, Mus raised his right hand to signal that Wendello could rest in place. Aren't you tired? The whole night's march almost caused Wendel's mental and physical breakdown. My physical fitness was too poor, so I just lay on the ground and started taking a nap. Mus looked around and then sat on the ground, taking a simple rest. There's no way, this is the routine of the Dark Elves, they are too afraid of backstabbing. In the tradition of Dark Elves, betrayal is the most common occurrence. Anyone who is not vigilant enough will be stabbed in the back by their compatriots at night, so every night, Mus will maintain a 12-point vigilance, even in the old world empires that still maintain this habit. Observing the surroundings at the same time, it is clear that there are no potential enemies around. Dark Elves generally prefer to rest in the early morning, when the light is abundant. If someone wants to assassinate, they can also be seen from afar. As for Wendello, he seemed completely unaware and fell asleep on the ground. This behavior made Mus sneer, and of course she also needed to rest. She sat quietly on the ground, holding her chin with her left hand and a dagger with her right hand. No matter what terrible situation happened, she could immediately react. The erect elf ears can hear sounds within 20 meters of the surroundings, and a burst of understanding and sobering. Ha, is it that guy from Wendello? I only slept for 2 hours. Fortunately, Wendell is very young and staying up late won't cause any particularly heavy burden. And still lying on the ground completely disregarding it, the quality of sleep is amazing. After he woke up, he immediately faced a very serious problem. After a night of marching, my stomach is already rumbling with hunger. If I don't eat anything, I'm afraid I'll starve to death on the spot. This reflects the benefits of being from a rural background. Wendello, who grew up in the countryside, knows all the basic wild vegetables and game. The 2 of them are now in a forest far from the road, and there are naturally many primitive delicacies nearby. Edible mushrooms, bright red berries, wild vegetables, and bird eggs. In no time, Wendello was already holding a pile of things and lighting a bonfire next to Mus, then happily cooking. Cooking is a very important skill, and it happens that Wendell has already become proficient in it. In just a moment, the delicious roasted mushrooms, roasted berries, and boiled wild vegetables egg vegetable soup have been cooked. Don't worry, the pottery used for cooking can still be sold after washing it. Looking at the breakfast in his hand, and then at Mus who was still sleeping, Wendello walked towards her holding half of the food as they were considered partners. Just 3 steps away from Mus, the former Lord of Fear lifted his head in an instant, his eyes firmly fixed on Wendell's body, and there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. The dagger was quickly pointed out by her, and she raised a left index finger to her mouth, gesturing for Wendell to remain quiet. "I don't mean anything else, I just want to ask you to have breakfast." Wendello quickly explained that the Dark Elves were very selfish, and perhaps if they approached Muse without permission, she would consider it an assassination attempt. "I certainly heard what you wanted to do from your footsteps." Muse's words were very low, so low that even a small step back from Wendello could not hear them clearly. Before he could react, Muse had already charged towards him, with the dagger in his hand only a fist away from his eyes. Then one hand firmly pressed Wendello's head, and the force immediately made him lie on the ground. Fortunately, the food didn't spill out. "I know you're here to deliver breakfast to me, but your senses are too dull. Haven't you heard it yet? Someone's staring at us." Muse didn't even glance at Wendello, and after completely pinning him down, his gaze remained fixed on the nearby forest grass. "1, 2, 3, all of them are adult human males, and they have already noticed us." This sentence was spoken lightly from Muse's mouth, as if it were a leisurely walk after dinner. How could it be? This is far away from villages and towns, there will definitely be no bandits or thieves. Wendello originally wanted to argue, after all, she did not hear any sound around her. Either the Lord of Fear had committed PTSD, or she simply scared herself. At this moment, a sharp arrow suddenly shot from the grass that Muse had been staring at. Before the sound of breaking through the air could be heard, the arrow had already flown in front of her. But in the eyes of the Lord of Fear, this arrow has no power at all. With a gentle lift of her hand, she actually grabbed the arrow directly and then inserted the entire arrow in front of Wendello. "If you want to survive, lie down and don't move." In a moment, 2 more arrows flew into the grass, and Muse elegantly lifted the dagger. The arrows and dagger collided, producing a spark that then fell down and inserted into the soft soil. Humans are just humans, they are too weak. This kind of archery is not even comparable to his youngest daughter, a high-level elf militia archer who has only studied archery for 2 years. Wendello certainly knew what this meant. As a Lord of Fear, Muse naturally had experience in fighting against higher elves. At the same time, the archery of higher elves is one of the best among all races, and it is easy to deal with elf archers like Muse. Looking at human archers is like looking at children holding toys. There are vast forests within the Empire, and some farmers or poachers join the Imperial Archer Corps in times of war. When there is no war, they also seek ways to earn extra income. 3 Imperial archers slowly emerged from the grass, clutching tattered daggers with a wicked smile and ill intentions. "Hee, today I not only met 2 fat sheep, but also a little beauty." Chapter 7. The forest of the Empire is very safe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's over, it's over. Wendello lay on the ground, repeating this sentence in his mouth. Quickly attacking, even now wearing full body armor, Muse, as the Lord of Fear, can easily catch up with the Imperial Archer. Not to mention that she is completely unarmored now. In the eyes of the Imperial Archers, this guy's speed is like flying, almost charging in front of the 3 of them in the blink of an eye. They no longer had the opportunity to continue shooting and drew their short swords in an attempt to resist. Just a woman without armor, 3 adult men can easily kill him no matter what. These Imperial archers, whether they have been poaching for a long time or looting for a long time, have no experience in fighting against dark elves, and still retain the basic idea that women have less combat power than men. But when the head of the archer at the front was cut off alive with a dagger, they finally panicked. The remaining 2 people had no idea what terrifying monster they had provoked, and only one last thought remained in their minds, which was to escape. Humph. You want to escape? Human morale is really low. Mus smiled slightly and completely shook off the blood on the dagger. When he looked up again, the originally purple pupils had already begun to emit a purple light. Attainment in killing. Wendell is certainly very clear about what this is. When the Dark Elves kill a large number of enemies on the battlefield, they will receive blessings from Cain, who is known for his killing skills, thereby enhancing their combat effectiveness. Although Mus is a lord of fear, he needs to kill enough targets in battle to stimulate his killing skills. But it's probably because I've been wandering for too long, haven't fought in a long time, and killing only one person this time has inspired my killing skills. More powerful attack ability and sudden recovery of stamina made Mus feel like a god of killing, even killing all 3 archers in less than 10 seconds. When I finally returned to Wendell's side and picked up my breakfast, the soup was still hot. When he picked it up, he instinctively smelled it, but considering that the man in front of him had no reason and didn't have the courage to poison him, he started drinking heavily. To be honest, the taste is quite good and nutritious. At this moment, Wendello had the opportunity to focus his attention on the 3 poor archers. Hey, it's not their fault. After all, they are fighting against the Fear Lord among the Dark Elves. Even without armor, Mus can still fight against 3 Imperial giant swordsmen. I saw that those 3 people had already been killed by a dagger, and their bodies looked terrible. Falling into the hands of the Dark Elves was such a fate. Basically, his limbs and body were separated, and his body was covered in various bloodstains. Even Mus went crazy and took out the organs of 3 archers, splattering them everywhere to vent his pent-up anger. Seeing this terrifying scene made Wendello shake his head repeatedly. It's not easy to collect loot now. Hard-faced, he began to search for the body. After all, it could also be considered a source of wealth. From these 3 archers, more than 10 bloody copper coins were also felt, and their short swords and leather armor were all stripped off. Due to living in rural areas since childhood, Wendello, who came from a poor family, naturally mastered the skills and craftsmanship of tailors. Cut 3 sets of leather armor apart, and then create a basic set of leather armor protection for Mus according to her figure. The Dark Elves are also pragmatists. Although she discriminates against the human race, she never discriminates against human craftsmanship or equipment created by humans. The leather armor with blood stains was also worn on the Mus after cleaning, which was good and not bad. Not only did it not hinder one's movement at all, but it also ensured that movement was not restricted. If a basic set of armor can provide an armor value of 90, then such a body of leather armor also has an armor value of 10, which is better than nothing in terms of defense ability. The Dark Elves naturally accept it completely. It seems that Wendello's suggestion of forming a company is not bad news. He is indeed accumulating the strength and wealth to return to Nagaras. Therefore, in the future journey, one can also refer to this human opinion to a greater or lesser extent. After eating, drinking, and resting, the 2 of them abandoned the body of the archer and continued walking towards the direction of Nuen city. But they didn't notice that shortly after they left here, more than 10 monsters the same size as humans, but furry, were attracted by the smell of blood and then crouched on the ground, savoring the taste of flesh and blood. Of course, just 3 corpses are not enough to divide the more than 10 furry monsters. One of them kept sniffing the land in front of him and then shouted at his companions. Stretching out his finger in one direction, it was exactly the direction Wendell and Mus were walking. After gnawing 3 corpses into bones, this group of furry monsters completely discovered a new direction and chased after them with footprints and scent. At the same time, with the help of the sun and the river to determine their location, Wendello tossed and turned the map back and forth several times, and was able to determine the current location of the 2. There are still about 2 weeks to go from Nuen city, and if we follow the habits of the Dark Elves, it will only take 7 days. Since there was still some time left, Mus's footsteps also slowed down, and her instinct as the Lord of Fear also made her turn back to look at Wendell. What are the general threats within your human empire? Wendell was taken aback, not because he was unaware of the threats within the empire, but because there were too many threats within the empire. A useless mechanism for selecting emperor's authority, independent and devoid of loyalty, lacking imperial prestige in the early stages and useless in the later stages, powerful anti-line troops, and bandits and wild beasts everywhere in the forest. The Beastman. Mus is not interested in the political structure of the empire. The Dark Elves all believe in survival of the fittest and despise hereditary systems. However, when it comes to orcs, Mus has only heard news from the northern fortress group of the Dark Elves. It is said that after being polluted by chaos, humans or beasts will become like half-humans and half-beasts. Although the Dark Elves have already eliminated the Beastmen within Nagaris, a large number of Beastmen attack fortress groups from the far north of the world every year, causing considerable damage. In Mus's memory, she only knew about the dangers of the Beastmen, but did not understand their combat abilities and techniques. So, is this Beastman strong in combat? The combat power of the Beastman is average. If there is a single Beastman, I can easily deal with it. Wendello finally had a chance to pretend to be a pushover. When he was still in the countryside, he collected a lot of information in order to run a business, so he naturally knew very well about the Beastman race. However, although individual orcs' combat power is weak, they generally prefer to go out in groups, with more than 10 or 20 of them coming together. As soon as Wendello finished speaking, Mus immediately squinted his eyes and looked into the forest behind him. It seems you're right. Chapter 8. Beastman Threats. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mus's gaze was fixed on the forest behind him, as if he had seen through the hidden things inside at a glance. The one approaching was definitely the Beastman. But he lacks experience in fighting with orcs, and a qualified fear lord will never fight against things he doesn't understand. She will definitely understand the weaknesses of her enemies before the battle. Wendy, Luo, you know about Beastmen, right? What are Beastmen's weaknesses? What is their most deadly attack method? This is finally the direction where Wendel's profession aligns. In his childhood, he was worried about being eaten by the wild beasts that could be seen everywhere in the forest every day, and of course, he also did a lot of research on the wild beasts. Beastmen, with human intelligence and the power of beasts, can ambush and formulate tactics, but their physical fitness is not strong, and a single Beastman cannot pose a threat. Once they form a group, they will become a powerful force. So, will they use tactics? Mus immediately grasped the characteristics of Wendello's words, and then his eyes rolled, realizing that the situation was not optimistic. The ordinary Mongfu is not a match for the Dark Elves, but if there are enemies who attract firepower, those who output remotely, and those who flank, the situation will not be optimistic. The fact proves that Mus's idea is very correct. After finding the target, the Beastman began various tactical actions. Although these creatures are able to conceal their bodies in the forest, making it impossible for humans like Wendello to find their traces, the stench on their bodies has completely exposed them to Mus's view. There are 3 Beastmen on the front, with 2 Beastmen archers on each side slowly touching them, and even 4 Beastmen searching for an opportunity to turn around. The last 3 Beastmen squatted in the rear, thinking that there was no threat to dealing with just 2 enemies, so they did not come up. Can you protect yourself? Mus tilted his eyes and glanced at Wendello. Of course, he knew that this human could not defeat the Beastman, but if this guy died at the hands of the Beastman, it would definitely be a great loss for him. She must have been overthinking this, thinking about how to get rich and save her life every day. Wendello naturally has his own set of ways to fight against the Beastmen. He crouched directly on the ground, then picked up a piece of wood and placed it in front of him. There are 3 types of Beastmen in total. Bad horned beasts, a single entity whose strength is completely inferior to that of humans. A unicorn, a single entity with greater power than humans. Giant monsters, an unimaginable and terrifying existence. Generally speaking, in forests close to human cities and roads, there are no big horned beasts or monsters, and the only enemy is the bad horned beasts. The attack ability of melee unicorns is indeed too weak. Although Wendello cannot defeat them, he can still keep running to avoid being hurt by them. Although long-range horned beasts can shoot arrows, their archery and bows are too poor. As long as they are not close to the face, they will hardly hit the enemy. Holding a piece of wood and squatting on the ground in front of him, Wendell's mission has been completed, which at least ensures that he will not be harmed by any ranged attacks. By revealing a pair of eyes, take a look at how the Fear Lord Mus fights. A dagger flew out quickly and hit one of the Beastman's heads directly. The entire dagger was inserted into the head, and the Beastman fell to the ground in response. Brain plasma, more foul-smelling than their blood, slowly flowed out, and Mus shook his head. It seemed that the dagger could not be taken anymore. Then he quickly bent down, and the elf ear heard the sounds coming from around. His right hand pulled from his waist, and the lute short sword he had obtained from the 3 archers was held in Mus's hand. Holding a sword on the back, the Lord of Fear prefers close combat, which allows her to enjoy the pleasure of battle more. The hind leg muscles contract and then sprint fiercely. Although the Dark Elves have been separated from the higher elves for thousands of years, they still retain the special abilities of elf speed and martial arts skills. Elves always have to attack one step ahead of other races. Quickly sprint in front of another beast man, then slash the short sword diagonally from that guy's neck. The scapula, collarbone, and ribs were cut off one by one with brute force, and the entire beast man was almost instantly cut in half. When the upper body fell to the ground and the organs were in chaos, only the lower body remained standing still. Mus's speed is too fast for ordinary beastman's eyes to keep up. When the lower half of the orc fell to the ground due to loss of strength, Mus had already flashed behind another orc. Beastmen have the same structure as humans. As soon as she finished speaking, the short sword in her hand had already pierced through the beast man's back and then out of his chest, with a still beating heart on the blade. The beastmen finally began to panic, and now they realized that they had provoked some characters they shouldn't have provoked. They all threw away their armor and began to flee, and in no time, all the surviving orcs ran into the forest. Mus only glanced into the forest before giving up the idea of pursuing. After all, Wendello had previously said that orcs were a very cunning creature. There may be their ambushes in the forest, and chasing them recklessly will only put oneself in a disadvantageous situation. Swinging the blood off the short sword, he walked slowly to Wendello's side and lifted him directly from the ground. "Did you get it done?" Wendello looked around and then nodded. Although the beastmen are a cunning race, they are also very timid and their morale can easily collapse. They have indeed fled. "That's good, let's start working." When Mus said this, she already regarded Wendello as her partner, the simplest cooperative relationship. She was responsible for the battle, while Wendello was responsible for clearing the battlefield. Okay, don't forget your job." Despite the stench emanating from the body of the beast man, Wendello still collected a very good loot. Although the beast man is not very wealthy, he is also wearing leather protective gear obtained from hunting, and there are also some teeth with low wear and tear, which are also very good products. But both Wendello and Mus, who took off their guard, overlooked one of the most important factors. That is because the beastman has an extremely terrifying revenge mentality, and one of the beastmen finally overcame his fear after running for a while and returned to the place where he had fought before. Coincidentally, I saw a human searching for the bodies of its compatriots, and for a moment, my anger rose from my heart. I quickly picked up the bow and arrow in my hand and used brute force to shoot an arrow representing revenge. Chapter 9. First Experience. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mus's elf ears clearly heard the sound of the distant bowstring being pulled. In my mind, I immediately knew about the return of the beast man, and the elf sensitivity could immediately sense the direction that the bow was aimed at. It's not me at all, but I'm aiming towards Wendell. In less than a second, Mus had already turned his gaze to Wendell, and then it was clear that the human had not made any movement. I didn't even hear the sound of danger approaching. Shout him to avoid it. It's definitely too late. That human has not received professional military training. If he shouts down, he might lift his head and look around. There is only one solution left now. bend down and charged towards Wendello at the fastest speed possible. As Mus began to charge forward, the broken bow in the Beastman's hand also shot the arrow representing revenge. At the last moment, Mus's fist and Wendello's face made an intimate contact, and then Wendello was beaten to the ground, avoiding the flying arrows. Meanwhile, Mus completely ignored a situation where the forces interact with each other. She pushed Wendell away, but she didn't have any more speed to dodge the incoming arrow, and was pierced through her armor by such a piercing arrow, piercing into her flesh. But the Lord of Fear is not a good person either. She completely overcame the pain caused by being hit by the arrow, threw her short sword in her hand, and then threw it fiercely towards the place where the arrow flew, like holding onto a spear. After the sound of flesh and blood being pierced by a short sword came from the forest, Wendell realized what situation he had encountered and hurriedly climbed up from the ground to run to Mus's side. "Don't worry about me for now, go fix the knife." Mus's eyes were sharp, which was the terrifying appearance of the Dark Elf clan when they entered a combat state. Wendello had no choice but to follow suit and quickly ran into the forest. Following the trail of the short sword flying over, he discovered the Beastman who had been pierced. At this time, the situation of the Beastman archer was naturally not optimistic, as its chest was completely pierced by the short sword. But this guy has tenacious vitality and still has a breath, but the wound is too heavy, lying on the ground without any resistance ability. Go over, tear it with a short sword, and end the mission. Wendello kept cheering himself on because he had done things like killing chickens and ducks before, but he had never done anything like killing humans before. In addition, the difference between beastmen and humans is not much. Wendello did not want to kill beastmen, but he did not have the courage to do so. After all, killing someone is still his first time doing it. Slowly walk to the side of the Beastman, constantly cheering oneself on. It's very simple, use a short sword and stab it to pieces. But this hand, I don't know how to act, but if the Beastman keeps it, it will definitely be a disaster. Wendello certainly knew that it was necessary to kill all the Beastmen, but he still lacked experience in such killing behavior. People who have always aimed to survive will instinctively resist all bloody scenes, and if they have a musket, they will naturally be willing to shoot. But chopping the enemy with a sword will cause too much blood to flow out, making it disgusting and splattering on oneself. The distance with the Beastman was too close, making him feel very uncomfortable. As Wendello looked left and right, he found a huge stone, ran over quickly, and used all his strength to lift it up before coming to the Beastman. Stones are always the first killing weapon of inexperienced people. Striving to throw a huge stone, the heavy stone successfully smashed the head of the Beastman into flesh and mud. The splashing skull fragments and brain plasma, due to the pressure of a giant rock, did not spill onto Wendell's body, finally allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief. Despite the stench, he retrieved the short sword inserted into the body of the Beastman and quickly ran towards Mus to report. And the Dark Elf fearless lord sitting on the ground seemed to have grown impatient. "Why did you take so long?" "I'm here, I'm torturing that Beastman, it actually hurt you." Mus clicked, unsure if it was a mockery or disappointment. "Your ability to torture people is too poor, I didn't even hear a piercing scream." Then he snorted lightly and frowned. This scene was naturally caught in Wendello's eyes, and he also saw at a glance that Mus was hit by arrows on his arm and began to bleed. And her other hand was placed on top of the arrow shaft, completely gripping the arrow with both hands, breaking off the excess shaft and throwing it away, only frowning throughout the entire process. The arrow remained in his arm and lifted his chin to look at Wendell. "Keep going, this place is not suitable for healing." The two continued their journey and finally discovered an abandoned farm before nightfall. A simple wooden cabin that appears to have been abandoned for several years, but can still barely provide shelter from wind and rain, while completely concealing the flames inside the house. By the campfire in this house, Wendello is boiling hot water with pottery before undergoing a very precise surgical operation. Come on, I'm ready. Mus came to say that by the fire, she had already leaned against the wall and placed a piece of stick in her hand in her mouth. But just as Wendell turned around, his head suddenly lowered with a swoop. It's not because the wound is scary. When I was in the countryside, I often encountered injured villagers, and it was common for them to get stuck in the flesh with branches and arrows. There is no difficulty in handling it, disinfection, arrow retrieval, stitching, and everything is done in one go. But when I turned around, I saw a scene I had never seen before. Mus had completely taken off his upper body clothes, and his entire jade body was completely exposed in front of Wendello. But rather than being a jade body, it is more like a body that has been weathered by war. In addition to the two eye-catching things, Mus's upper body also has many healing scars. Arrow wounds, knife wounds, and dagger stab wounds, each with a small area, have already turned into scars. Has the dagger not been heated yet? Seeing Wendello standing in place, Mus naturally quickly urged him, but he didn't think there was anything wrong with showing his body in front of a human. Okay. Carrying a small knife that had already been burned and disinfected by flames, Wendello slowly walked over to Mus, not looking at other parts, but completely focused on the wound. A small knife cuts open the skin at the arrow position, then gently shakes the arrow, which is good and does not have too much blood or flesh adhering. Wendello slowly exerted force and carefully removed the arrow, then threw it into the fire. As soon as the arrow left Mus's arm, a large amount of blood oozed from the wound, almost flowing to the surface of the wound in just a few seconds. At this moment, Mus suddenly realized that the situation was different from what she had initially anticipated. After Wendello took out the arrow for her, he did not immediately proceed to the next step. Burn me with red iron to stop bleeding, what are you waiting for? Chapter 10. Arriving at Nuen City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mus didn't say anything, it was okay. As soon as he spoke, Wendello shifted his gaze and looked again. At the same time, he instinctively swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Fortunately, he didn't suck out the toxin from the wound, otherwise he would have swallowed the toxin just now. However, Mus didn't care about Wendello's gaze. After all, the human race is just like cats and dogs in the eyes of the dark elves, and exposing their bodies in front of them is not a problem. Fortunately, Wendello also quickly restrained his emotions, brought over the water that had just been boiled and cooled, and began to rinse Mus's wound. During his childhood, Wendello spent a lot of time studying orcs due to his fear of being caught or killed by them. The arrows of the Beastman go without saying, they must be dirty and dangerous. There is a high probability of contracting tetanus and other diseases after being accidentally shot. So after rinsing Mus's wound with clean water, Wendello also evenly sprinkled the prepared herbal powder on the cracked flesh of Mus. This kind of medicine powder that could make the Imperial Provincial Army grit their teeth and persist did not cause any pain to Mus. It seems that the Dark Elf Fear Lord is not very sensitive to pain, or perhaps she has become accustomed to pain. Continue to look into Wendell's eyes without any expression or color. Later on, she noticed that Wendello had applied an expensive seasoning, white sugar, to her wound, and then wrapped it around a clean bandage, revealing a faint smile on her face. Sugar is a very expensive resource. Although Wendello has been slowly refining wild fruits since childhood, now he only has a small bag for emergency use. You've been watching for so long, but you can still touch it. After confirming that the wound was completely wrapped, Mus also focused all his attention on Wendello. It seems that establishing a so-called company with this human is not a bad thing. This guy has medical technology comparable to advanced elves and is also an excellent talent. It will definitely become a key factor for him to return to Nagaris, so it is also necessary to give him some rewards appropriately. For this innocent little virgin, the Dark Elf Fear Lord knows too well how to target him. Sitting next to Wendello while speaking directly made him panic. Sugar sprinkled on wounds can promote healing without leaving scars. Do you really not want to touch it? The clean bandage changes every 2 days, and after about 4 days, your wound will completely heal and won't be infected with tetanus and rabies. I applied some herbs. For inexperienced people like Wendello, taking a few sneak glances is already quite high pressure. And even though he is so close, he has the thief's heart, but he doesn't have the thief's courage. Camusi took the initiative to say that if he didn't reach out, wouldn't it be a bit disrespectful to Lord Fear? I do have some thoughts about it myself. But when he turned his head, Mus had already put on his clothes again and lay on his side on the ground. You guard the first half of the night, I guard the second half of the night. Afterwards, there was no response to Wendel's words and he fell asleep quietly. At least it means that I have gained the trust of this dark elf Fear Lord. Not only did she sleep with her back to herself, but she also gave herself the best night to watch. Leaning against the campfire, he slowly wiped away the copper coins collected from the enemy and then put them all into his endless wallet. The withered wallet was like the beginning, hiding all its wealth. As a copper-colored object lit up, the sun slowly rose in the sky, and the next day arrived. Mus lifted his foot and kicked Wendello on the shoulder, then tilted his head. It's time to continue our journey. We'll arrive at Nuen city tonight. It has to be said that following Mus for these few days has tormented Wendello. At his original speed, he had to walk for about half a month to reach Nuen city, but under the urging of the Dark Elves, he managed to walk for only a week. With legs numb and physical exhaustion, he finally arrived at the first city where he could rest. As long as he entered the city of Nuen, everything was safe. Looking at the human cities and towering city walls, as well as the human guard standing at the city gates and watchtowers, Mus was also very honest and hid his ears in his light purple long hair, then applied a herbal medicine to his hair. Her hair immediately turned slightly yellow, no different from the hair color of women within the empire. After collecting the city tax, the ordinary imperial provincial army certainly did not find the dark elf Fear Lord disguised as a human. In fact, it's not the fault of the imperial provincial army. If the dark elf affairs officer really wants to create chaos in the imperial city, such as destroying the city walls, assassinating the affairs officer, obstructing the march and attacking the entire team, the ordinary provincial army has no way to detect, let alone stop it. It is not a difficult problem for the Dark Elf Fear Lord to infiltrate the human city, and the current problem is left to Windlow. How can I sell the pottery I brought from Aldoff at the most suitable price? Hugging his chest with both hands, Mus quietly followed behind Wendello, watching how such a human should perform. In terms of business, it's very simple. First, we need to inquire about market prices, understand how much others' pottery is sold, and then my own pottery can be priced. However, Mus rolled his eyes directly. It's better not to tell her such meaningless things. She doesn't care about any business knowledge. Just suddenly reaching out his hand, he quickly caught a half-body thief walking past Wendello. Really, this half-body almost put his hand into Wendel's backpack just now, didn't he notice it at all? Human senses. As for the half-body thief who was subdued by himself, it is difficult to deal with. After all, Nuen is a city of humanity, and reckless killing will inevitably cause trouble. He could only lift the half-body with one hand and then throw it fiercely towards the roadside, causing him to crash into the trash can. Then he continued to follow Wendello while looking left and right, observing the human city. After walking through the dirty and foul-smelling streets, the poor market in Nuen city finally arrived. Here, you can sell all the pottery for a high price of 600 copper coins, but of course, Wendell, who has experience in running a business, knows that his goods can be more valuable. Aldoff's pottery is not something that ordinary civilians can use. If you take a few more steps to the civic market in Nuen city, you can sell it for a sky-high price of 800 copper coins, which is 8 silver coins. After investigating the market news, just as Wendell was preparing to leave the market with a backpack on his back, 3 thugs quickly gathered around. Give me money, transaction tax. But I didn't trade in this market. We don't care about this. This market has its own rules, no less than 20 copper coins, otherwise. The three thugs threatened while pounding the ground heavily with their wooden sticks.